Welcome back to this module on education research. In this next video on methodologies, we will be shedding light on the use of case studies in education research. The case study approach is best employed when you want to investigate one thing in a detailed or in-depth manner. It is not something that you can make generalisable theory from. There are a variety of things that can constitute a case study, but equally there are many things that are not. To unravel the definitions and mysteries that surround case study research, I focused the camera on two of my colleagues. The following conversation took place between Dr. Anastasia Gussetti and Dr. Rebecca Adderley from the University of Hull as they shared their experiences of following a case study approach in their respective areas of research. Let's listen to what they had to say.
So what does a case study mean for you in relation to educational research?
Well, I guess that for me, adopting a case study approach means that you're exploring a contemporary phenomenon, a contemporary event in depth and within its real-life context. Or what do you think? Could you define it in any other way, perhaps?
Oh yes, well I think that it's certainly got to be a bounded context and enclosed system, so it sort of has boundaries around it. And I think that we're talking about issues that are very particular to that context rather than very general issues. So I think we're answering very specific questions in relation to a case study.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say are the key features of a case study?
Well, I think that in a case study you probably need to involve a range of evidence, so you're not looking perhaps at one method of gathering data, so a range of data is gathered, so that would probably indicate that you were involved in collecting data over a longer period of time. And I think that I can see maybe two halves to a case study as well. The fact that you have the case itself, the context or the person or the place for the case study, but also some sort of unit of analysis as well. So you need some focus for the case study, that I suppose where you're going to draw your data from.
Okay, yes, and I would add to that usually when you're doing a case study, you're looking at real people within a real life context. So it's a very contemporary phenomenon or event that you're exploring.
Also, I was thinking that perhaps in some research you're just looking at what is happening, but within a case study context you're looking at sort of how and why those events are taking place as well, so it gives you quite the depth and richness to the data.
You're looking to explore why and how questions.
Yes, very definitely so.
Do you think there are different types of case studies?
Yes, I do. I think, researchers might choose between a single case study or a multiple case study design, but within that there are lots of other approaches as well, such as I was involved recently in a case study which was an exploratory case study. Some authors would refer to it as an instrumental case study because the case study itself is an instrument or a tool in order to gather the data.
Yes, that's a good distinction. And you can also have a descriptive case study where you're looking to describe an intervention or a phenomenon, as well as an exploratory case study where you're looking to explore situations. And sometimes the boundaries between these are blurred, so they're not mutually exclusive.
No, and sometimes I suppose if you have a multiple case study design, there might be times when you're making comparisons between one case and another, so you have the idea of a comparative case study as well.
And sometimes students will ask, can you really have a single case study, and what does it mean to have a single case study? And I guess my answer to that is that it varies. You can have a single person a single individual, or you can have a single class, a single school. So it all depends on what you're trying to answer, what is your research question, and what is the context that you're interested in. I don't know if you would agree.
Yeah, I definitely agree that you can use a single case study design, and certainly from I suppose if you look in the literature, and particularly the work of Robert Yin, he describes sort of elements of a single case study design, and also elements of multiple case study designs, and also, I suppose, nested case studies as well, where you're looking, I suppose, at different levels. So, for instance, if you had a school, you can also look at the school context, a particular classroom context, and maybe at individual children within that classroom context. So that's almost nested within the same case study.
It's what he calls an embedded case study, isn't it? And you can have either a single embedded case study or a multiple embedded case study.
Absolutely. So what do you think are the strengths of adopting a case study design?
Well, I guess for me, one of the strengths of a case study design is that it allows you to collect a range of data. You can use a range of data collection methods that make the study a lot richer, and in a sense it gives you different lenses to explore different people, different situations, so you get a more holistic picture of what you're trying to look at.
Oh, very, very much so. And I think the fact that you're exploring real people in real situations, you get a very nuanced view of reality and the lived experiences of the people that or the context that you're looking at as well. And so the data set is very rich. It has a depth to it that maybe with other methods of research you wouldn't be able to have. I think, it's also within situations that are not really susceptible maybe to numerical analysis, and the fact that you have the real words of your participants strengthens, I think, this method of research.
And it ties in with what we said before about answering why and how questions, because it allows you to do that.
Yes, absolutely.
Would you say there are any weaknesses when it comes down to doing a case study?
Well, some authors have said that it isn't a very rigorous method of inquiry, and that perhaps it can be used as a preliminary method of inquiry, but something more rigorous and maybe scientific is needed in order to support the data that you gather. Within the context of my own research, I read a lot about generalisability and the fact that you can't generalise from a case study because it is so specific to the context and so focused on individuals or particular places, and so to then try and apply that data to other situations is very difficult. But I talk a little bit that I do feel that some generalisations can be made, and I looked at the work of Michael Bassi. He talks about fuzzy generalisations, so perhaps not scientific in that you can make direct causal links between your context and other contexts, but perhaps that you can look at what might be the case or what could be the case. And I think using a multiple case study design enables you to be, I suppose, make much more direct links between different contexts. It probably strengthens the ability to generalise as well.
Yes, I totally agree with that. There is an issue when it comes down to generalizing your research findings, and I remember reading that there also might be a problem of getting at the truth, because sometimes you get so many different viewpoints because you're interviewing people at different levels. So if you're looking at a school, you might be getting a different view from the head teacher, from the students, or from the teachers, and you need to make a decision about whom to believe, and that has been one of the weaknesses of case studies within my own research context, getting at the truth.
Yes, it is, and I think this is, I think in some way that links in with the strengths of case studies, in that because you're drawing data from a number of sources, perhaps from interviews, from observations, from a range of different people, and the fact that perhaps you see opportunities to triangulate that data as well, it can sort of, I suppose, can turn out to be a strength rather than a weakness at the end.
Yeah,
I just wanted to say a little bit more as well about the generalisability, because although I didn't do this myself, say links can be made with the literature so you're sort of providing some analytical generalisation as well, so that you look at what has previously been found in the literature related to particular contexts or interests or focus of the case study, and looking at how what you found would link with perhaps a theoretical framework that somebody else has devised. So I think there can be some level of generalisation there as well.
That's very useful. And do we have any tips for researchers that are adopting a case study design?
Well, I'm going to talk again, I think, within the context of the research that I did. I did a case study design looking at whether the way teachers group children within and between classes, whether that has an impact on peer relationships. So the case study design enabled me to not find out just whether it had an impact, but also how and why. But in completing that study, I suppose I could offer a number of tips. I think I needed to develop very good relationships with the people that were part and parcel of my participants, but also the people who allowed me access to those participants. I worked within 3 schools over the period of a year, and I think because it was a case study over a long period of time, I needed to ensure that those relationships, I constantly was aware of making sure that they were maintained and very positive relationships. So I think that's a challenge if the case study is over a lengthy period of time. But the other thing I struggled with within my own research was this idea of insider and outsider research, because often people do case studies within their own organisation. And out of the 3 schools where I worked, one of those was a place where I'd previously worked as a teacher, and that presented me with a number of challenges related to how people viewed me. And so I think you've got to ensure that your relationships are positive, but also that you not only look at the way you view the context if you're very familiar with it, but also how you yourself are viewed if people are familiar with you.
Okay, and from my own research experience, I would add that there is a risk of collecting a lot of data, and you need to be really organized, and it can be very time consuming. So for my doctoral research, I did a multiple case study of 4 different projects across 4 schools, 8 countries, and I did a range of interviews, observations, and I ended up with so much data that there is always a risk of collecting too much, and you need to be really organized, and you also need to allow for things going wrong and possible mistakes, because it usually takes a long time to organize the case study, so there are a lot of things that can go wrong. So just be organized and start early, I guess, would be a general tip.
Absolutely, and I think also, obviously, when you're approaching organisations as part of a case study, in a way they act as gatekeepers. They allowing access to certain individuals within that particular setting. And I think sometimes they can alter your research agenda or persuade you that you need to make changes to your research in order to fit in with their own agenda. And I certainly found that schools wanted me to work with particular year groups. And so although I was wanting to work with sort of Key Stage 2 children, and towards the end of Key Stage 2, some schools said that they definitely didn't want me to work with Year 6, and other schools said they did want me to work with Year 6. And so I ended up having to broaden, I suppose, the age range of children that I wanted to access in order to fit in with the particular requirements of the schools.
So you have to be more flexible.
You do have to be, yeah, very much so, absolutely.